I'm going to ask the question, what is the status of the Second American Revolution in the States, taking back responsibility from the federal government? Personally, I believe that it's no accident that the number of unemployed in this country is approximately the same as the estimated number of illegal aliens in the country. There's a lot of controversy and different opinions about whether immigration is good or bad, but I don't think that that's entirely an accident. Have you noticed in the news sometimes that when there's a big, sweet, highly publicized roundup at a factory or plant or farm, something like that, that the next day or very shortly after there's a line outside that establishment of American citizens who want those jobs when they hear that there's openings in the news. And I do believe that it impacts American employment in that regard. As an attorney, I've helped people from many lands come to the United States legally and gain citizenship. I've personally sponsored a smart Eastern European person to come over who's hardworking. I've sat across the table from debtors who lost their small business and can't pay their debts because they were in a painting or home repair business, and they've been driven out of business by competition from often unlicensed illegal businesses, not just illegal aliens, but the businesses being illegal and unlicensed. Illegal immigration often involves other crimes, such as identity theft. Some illegal aliens steal the credit history and identity of one American while they steal a job from another. So I want to talk about what's happening in terms of the changes around the country as a lawyer and in terms of the legislation that's happening. Over a year ago, we had a symposium like this, sponsored by American Border Control, focusing on the Arizona law that was then very much in the news. We call it Arizona Day back in August. And not only did we talk about what was happening with that law and the prospects for something happening in Virginia, which until last Tuesday perhaps was blocked by Senator Saslaw in the Virginia Senate. We'll see what happens now. But we also were talking about the beginnings of a wave of copycat bills all around the country, and the fact that it was inspiring this uprising of states saying, no, we're not going to just wait and do what Washington tells us to do. So we also unveiled model legislation back then of a whole bunch of ideas. I know I spent countless hours going over the court cases to figure out how can we make sure that these ideas will get at the problem but won't be blocked by the courts. I looked at the legal opinions about the Arizona law, and I was actually very concerned that it might not pass constitutional muster the way the courts were reviewing things about what can we do. So we distributed back then a whole bunch of ideas, mainly focused on what is traditionally state legislation. And we distributed this about a year ago, and who knows, but some of these ideas seem to be popping up in some of the legislation. I don't know if it's due to us or not. I'd like to think so. For example, the new Alabama law forbids businesses from taking a tax deduction from the wages paid to illegal aliens. Because that's an area of traditional state authority, it is especially immune to court challenge. That was one of the emphases that we put out a year ago, was try to stay away from anything that's federal jurisdiction and focus on things that are so closely tied with traditional state authority that it can't be challenged in federal court. Now we had some news this week about Arizona. On yesterday, November 10th, 2011, the Obama Justice Department asked the U.S. Supreme Court to not hear an appeal of Arizona's anti-immigration law. The liberal Ninth Circuit Court of Appeals had blocked many parts of the Arizona law, including those with the most teeth. So Arizona Governor Jan Brewer had asked the U.S. Supreme Court to review the case on an expedited basis. The Obama administration is asking the Supreme Court not to hear the case. They're saying that we don't want the Supreme Court to look at this. So you have what they said was, quote, that the fact that several states have recently adopted new laws in this important area is not a sufficient reason for this court to grant review. Unquote. That was in the legal documents from the Obama administration. Now, one of the most controversial parts of the Arizona law, of course, required police, not just allowed, but required Arizona police, while enforcing other laws, to question a person's immigration status if officers suspect they are in the country illegally. And that was one of the things that created most of the uproar. Another thing we had happen just was November 7th this week. Yes, Time flies. On November 7th this week, the Obama Justice Department sued South Carolina. South Carolina had a similar law like Arizona and Alabama for the same reasons, to block it as unconstitutional. The South Carolina law is very similar to the Arizona law, and especially includes the main thing I just mentioned about having police stop and question if somebody is in the country legally or not. Officers couldn't stop or arrest a person merely on a suspicion of being illegal, but they have to be stopped for some other reason, probable cause. They also are not allowed to use race, color, national origin, anything like that. There has to be some valid suspicion. But the amazing thing that happened with this case is that 16 other nations want to be part of the lawsuit. So you have the federal government suing a state over a state law to enforce immigration. And 16 other nations, Latin American, Caribbean nations, say they want to be a part of a dispute between the federal government and a state. They want to join Mexico's amicus curiae, or friend of the court brief, to express their concerns about halting South Carolina's anti-immigration or anti-illegal immigration law. They said in a court filing that, quote, they have a substantial and compelling interest in ensuring their respective bilateral diplomatic relations with the United States are transparent, consistent, and reliable, and not frustrated by the actions of individual U.S. states, in this case South Carolina. In other words, what they're saying is that if there's a dispute of how the government runs inside the United States, they want to be a part of it. They, outside from another country, want to tell us how we resolve disputes within our own government. And the courts have in the past, in other such cases, allowed this. Allowed foreign countries to file friend of the court briefs expressing their opinion of how we should decide our laws. Now the thing is, what's interesting too is, if you know much about this area, that in order to implement treaties and concerns of foreign citizens, they really should want to make sure their citizens are identified. Because what's supposed to happen is, if you arrest someone from another country, if I'm arrested in another country, the embassy should be notified so they can participate. So really, if they were sincere at all, they would want to know if one of their citizens are arrested, they would want them to be identified, and they would want to be involved, so they would not want any of their citizens to not be identified as a citizen of their country rather than ours. But of course, that's not what really they're interested in. So the Obama Justice Department argued in their complaint that, quote, the Constitution and the federal immigration laws do not permit the development of a patchwork of disparate state and local immigration policies throughout the country. But there's a real dishonesty here, because states trying to solve this problem write legislation to cooperate closely with federal authorities. But the Obama administration then says in court, oh, if we have to respond to you, that's going to burden our finances. So they say that this is unconstitutional because you are trying to cooperate with us, and we have to respond. So the state law would impact federal resources because they'd have to answer the phone. And so they're trying very hard to be cooperative, and yet they're getting the opposite result.